extra special treat coming at you from the Places Will Go Show HQ. We have got none other than youth prodigy and manager of the Sidemen, a group that has been described as the biggest cultural export coming out of the UK. So welcome to the show, Jordan Schwarzenberger. I hope I pronounced that right. You probably get
pretty
that
much. No, pretty much. It's a mouthful.
Cool.
Schwarzenberger. That's pretty much bang on. So no, thank you guys, and excited to chat to you today.
Hey, no worries at all. Well, let me give our listeners a little bit more about you. So look, Jordan really is something else. I mean, he's 25 years old and he's taking the marketing industry by storm at the moment. He manages one of the most successful group of lads on the planet. And they've already launched 3 businesses from vodka to food under their brand name. I'm really looking forward to finding out a bit more all about that, which I'm sure he'll be able to tell us. But Jordan's actually incredibly successful in his own right as well. He founded Arcade Media. And previous to that, he was actually the youngest ever creative on Vice as well. Then joining Lad Bible to launch their agency Joyride. Now, Jordan probably doesn't know this, but I've been stalking him a bit. And he recently posted his personal statement from university, his application. And then interestingly, he subsequently dropped out after the first semester at university. But I really was fascinated by his personal statement and just how his mind really worked at that tender age. So I thought I'd read out a short extract. So he says, ever since I was at primary school, starting magazines, selling CDs, and shooting stop motion films in my bedroom, it's been my ambition to explore the world of media and technology. And my goal is to establish my own business and to use digitalization to maximize its capability to achieve success. I mean, geez, what an epitomization of years to come, huh? You're living and breathing what you set out there. And really, in a world of squiggly careers, Jordan has done it and seen so much that it's an absolute pleasure that he's on the show with us today to share his perspective. So welcome to the show, Jordan.
Oh, mate, that's so kind of you. Thank you. And really excited to get into it. It's weird. It's funny that it's like an age ago, but also weirdly not that long, I guess. It was probably 7 years ago that I did that.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah, mad.
Well, Jordan, also for me, brilliant to have you on the show. You're 25, but boy, you've packed it in. And actually, I was just telling my son the other day that you were on, and he was like, "What? Really? And actually, we were talking about KSI. He obviously had a boxing fight or 2, but I don't know if you know this, Richie. 2 boxing fights in one night, 2 knockouts. And I said to my son, "Do you think he's going to want to go on and actually be like a real contender in boxing?" And my son said, "He can do whatever he wants." And then I remember thinking that you're coming on the show. Yeah, but there's probably quite a lot that goes on behind the scenes to put all this together. I mean, it just doesn't happen by clicking your fingers. So anyway, fantastic to have you on the show. And as Richie said, that entrepreneurial streak was obviously there from a long, long time ago, and we'll hear all about that. But for now, let's get started. So I suppose, Jordan, how has summer of 2022 been for you?
Yeah, I mean, summer of 2022 has been busy, as is everything really in I think the world of the Sidemen. I think we do a lot and we try and pack in as much as we can. I think one of the things about what we do at Arcade, and obviously it's not obvious necessarily to anyone on the outside, but we're 100% focused on the Sidemen. So it's quite a unique setup for us, because where with most management companies, you might have rosters of hundreds and sometimes thousands of clients who you're trying to all manage and serve. Our whole ethos as a team is to dig 100% into the Sidemen world. So the benefit of that massively is sort of creative focus and a discipline that comes with kind of clear boundaries on where we can move, what we can do, and ultimately where we're thinking. We're always trying to think about advancing and building that franchise, that brand, and scaling it, growing it into new territories and new verticals and so on. But then at the same time, that comes with a lot of work within each of those verticals and strands of businesses, because we're able to do so much. So we almost become, I think, not burdened by the amount, but because there's just so much that we're digging in and able to execute because of the boys and because of our focus, it means that there's a lot going on always, which is great. So that's been the summer. We've launched the Sidemen trading cards brand called Side Cards, which we've done in partnership with Topps, which has gone down really well. Which is like, so, as somebody said on Twitter, the boys are completing side quests now, which I think is quite apt. It basically is like these side missions, like trading cards, which is an idea that the guys had a long time ago that they've always wanted to do. And we managed to do that. And then we also started the rollout and the launch for the charity match, which is coming up on the 24th of September. So that's 26,000 people at Charlton, the Valley. Amazing lineup of creators from like Noah Beck and Chunks and Philly to people like Castro, Lazy, like all the biggest creators in the world are joining. We've got so many more to announce as well. So it's been a lot balancing those two. We've got parties coming up. We've got, Josh is turning 30 on the weekend and he's got a big party happening. We've got all sorts of other projects that I'm not allowed to speak about, as well as the brands that we launched last year, which is Sides, which is a fried chicken brand with over 80 sites now, XX Vodka, which is the vodka brand, and then Side Plus, which is the membership club. So we've got all of those, and then all the other new stuff. And yeah, it keeps moving. Basically, the train keeps going.
Dude, do you actually sleep? Like, what's the deal, man?
You know what? Thankfully, look, we have 3 co-founders, myself, Aaron, and Sab. We have an amazing team. And I think one of the best things, I say this, I never start a business on my own. I would never do it again. Not that I did do it this time, but the benefit is we managed to like share the load so well that we never feel that stressed. Like everything's and again, I think it also comes from the focus thing, because we're just doubling down. It's a lot, but actually because we've got so many people in the team now, it's quite manageable, and I feel like it's kind of one business with loads of different divisions, and we sit as the board of that business rather than it being us in the weeds of it constantly, which I think is definitely the way to do it.
You will do it again, because another big opportunity will come up at some point. I mean, you clearly got entrepreneurship in your DNA. I mean, it's super interesting to hear about the sheer intensity of it all, and I guess what comes to mind is, how do you manage that? Because everybody's human, and there's how to avoid burnout. How do you sort of have a conversation about the intensity that's okay enough, not too much?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think how do we do it? I think we have, one of the things, I guess is a bit of a hack, is hiring such talented people who can manage a threshold which most people probably couldn't, but they do it quite effortlessly. And I think part of that is hiring people who are natives in this space, so much so they've lived and breathed the Sidemen world. There's no looking anything up. They just know, they have the instinct for it. And we have a team of people who all have that same, I think, creative flair and instinct. So many people, infinitely more talented than myself, who are able to just execute at such a pace, but without it being ever a stress. People are obviously, they're busy and there's a lot going on, and bless like people like Oscar, who he's our 20-year-old designer from Denmark, who does all the Sidemen Sunday posters and is unbelievable at making these incredible assets. He's a lead designer across so much that we do, sitting with Henry, who's our art director. And, he's like on this treadmill of poster, video after video after video after video, asset after asset. But he's so brilliant and so talented that I think it stepped his level up. And because I think we hope anyway that we have a culture of high freedom, high trust, I think people are able to grow and develop and almost push themselves without feeling like they're getting pushed by us or needlessly pushed by us. I think we set really high standards, but ultimately people care enough that they set those standards for themselves anyway. So it means that someone like an Oscar, I think, has had to, I'm sure, in order to enjoy life and survive and thrive as he is doing, ensure that he is so much more efficient than he probably was before. And same for me, I think I've had to become infinitely more efficient now. I've got 2 babies, I've got a 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old with my wife. And I always say that's like the hack of all hacks for business. Personally, I've never found anything like it, because you are forced into like hyper efficiency, and you have to step your level up, your speed of execution, your ability to delegate, your ability to staff and resource, because you have no other choice. So it kind of pushes you against the wall, whereby you then have to become 10 times more effective, which I think is something that I've definitely experienced myself over the last 2 and a bit years, where I'm now, I'd say, more like quicker and more efficient than ever when it comes to work, because I know I have to get back to be with the boys from 3 or whenever it is I get home, and bath time and everything. So yeah, I think it's different for everyone, but I think that's kind of it. It's giving people the high freedom and high trust in the culture, which allows for people to up their own levels, and also then hiring people who care enough, who have that ambition, but also love the Sidemen and that brand. And that's the other good thing about the focus, is we get to hire fans, ultimately, people who love the work that the boys do. So it's more than just a job for them. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it really means the world, because they've grown up with these guys and they've represented, 10 years now of their life. So it's an interesting one. I think we're in a very privileged position to have that pick, I think.
Dude, I love that. And actually, guys, top tip here, right? If you want to get hyper efficient, have kids. Boom.
There we go.
that's the advice. Hey man, I've got a 2.5 and a 3.5. So I've sort of lived and living that sort of experience. And you're absolutely right. It's a bit of a change of focus, and you need to kind of really get efficient with the time to manage all those various balls you got to juggle, really. So
exactly.
I can empathize, man. But look, let's take a step back here, right? I mean, God, what a position you're in, honestly. I mean, like you said, you articulated perfectly when you said you got so many people working in this brand that have grown up with these boys and are living and breathing it and love it. And it's almost a part of them. I mean, how on earth do you get into your shoes? Like, what happened? Like, tell us the story behind it.
Yeah, I mean, so it's been, I think, well, with the Sidemen boys specifically, I think my first, I guess, window into their world, obviously growing up with them as well, but my first sort of window into their world was really 2016 when I went to their charity match at Southampton when I was at Lab Bible. So we covered that, and I was there with Sport Bible, did all the Instagram stories, and was down at the pitch and met all the boys and a bunch of people in the scene. And the mad thing for me was just seeing the scale of it. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. They'd sold out, I think it was 13,000. So we're going to have double that amount when we go. And the reason why it was 13,000 was because they had one stand, because if they had another, it would become an incident that would require the police, and they'd have to get licensing and all of that. So they sold out their one stand very quickly. It was 1 and a bit stand. And I just remember walking out onto the touchline and seeing this whole wall of these kids at the time, right? Or like younger people. And just witnessing for the first time ever, like, okay, this is mad. Like, it looks like it's numbers on a screen when you look at it online, right? And comments in a comment section. It doesn't really feel real. But then when you go out and you see the love that people have for these guys, the energy, the fandom is just on another level. I've never seen anything like it before. And I think that for me was the first window. I was like, okay, this is the biggest that there is. There's no celebrity in the country who could command this level. One Direction at their height, at their peak, cool, maybe, or for sure, obviously, right, they did, right? And a few other bands and people in the last sort of 10 years. But this is why I say, and I think that quote you said at the beginning was probably mine, that they are, in my mind, the biggest cultural export of this generation coming out of this country in the entertainment space. I can't think of anyone else. I think One Direction did what they did for their generation. But I think the Sidemen are doing it for this generation now. And I think, yeah, that was my window in. And then from there, it was about I went to YMU, where I was chief creative officer, so looking after the creative and strategy and the sort of future proofing, if you will, for the clients there. So there's like, I think it's 1,000 plus clients, like loads of people from, in Anton Deck and Philip Schofield, Holly Willoughby, people in the TV space, so to speak. One of my roles was bringing in new talent, like people like Amelia de Moldenberg, Chicken Shop Date, and Mini Chihuahua, Woody and Kleiny. All sorts of people coming through from social. That was one of the things that I was responsible for, was helping to bring through new talent. And thankfully now they're in a position where they've got an amazing client roster of people, and that's growing every day, which is amazing, which is brilliant to watch. But I was there for 4 years. COVID then happened. And then when COVID happened, we just had our eldest Wolf, who's like 2.5 now, but he was obviously born January 2020. And I remember the company, when it went into that mode, just went into, it's like safe mode on a computer. It was like everything just went so intense and very functional, as we had to try and survive as a business, based on the fact that the company put a lot of stock into live and lost a lot of profit, obviously, as everybody did, right? But it was difficult. And I think for me, it was just enough of a nugget to be like, right, if there was an opportunity elsewhere, the way that the intensity of that time, missing out on bedtimes, bath times, calls and board meetings constantly, all of the sort of the stress of trying to do everything and also nothing at the same time, caused for me a sense of just enough to be like, okay, cool, if something comes, or if there's something that's out there that's interesting, I'm going to be open to that. And lo and behold, then Aaron, who is a great friend of mine, obviously one of my best mates now, but he was at YMU in the accountancy side. We got on so well. He had loads of different clients who he'd bring to me and say, oh, like, can you help talk to them and help them with their social and the strategy and everything else? He kind of quasi-managed, as well as being the accountant for his clients. He looked after his people so brilliantly, and they stayed with him and loved him. And yeah, we got on really well. He went off to manage some TikTokers, and then me and him stayed really close. And we always had a moment. And he always says, I remember this moment, we were stood there outside, I think it was in like outside the office or nearby the office of YMU, like around the corner. And we looked at each other and we said, one day we're going to do something together. It's going to be amazing. Don't know what it is, but we're going to do something. Because I always wanted to do more with him, but it just wasn't enough at the time as a business for me to make the jump over. So then it got to the point where he'd met Sam Ewens, who's, also an amazing friend now, and he's our third co-founder. They then had discussed and said, look, why don't we talk to me, and we will come together and see if there's an opportunity to speak to the boys about what they're doing, because he's been the accountant for them, a bunch of them as individuals, and also the group for a number of years. He's probably absolute number one in terms of the YouTube accounting space, or the creative accounting space. He's pioneered that in the UK through his company called Starbucks, looks after everyone. So he already had their trust and also knew their situation. And so we all came together and said, look, there's an opportunity to speak to them. and to see what more we could do. I then said, okay, cool, here's a strategy that we could put together, which outlines the vision for them. How far can we take this brand? What's just, even from just a 10-minute, look at what they're doing, where are they now, where can they get to? And in that, as we saw immediately, there's a million things. It's a never-ending list of opportunity for them. And then we said to the guys, like, what do you think? You guys are killing it on the content side, but there's so much more you can be doing. Do you want to go for it? And they said, yeah, let's do it. So handed in my notice at YMU, had a month notice. It was very quick. So that was before they changed to 3 months. And then I was out basically as soon as that, it felt like as soon as I handed that in. And then we started. So we started beginning of April last year. It's only been a year and a half, or just under a year and a half, I think. And it's been an amazing time, as you said, like launched three brands with the boys, now Sidecards, got about 6 or 7 other things that we're working on, got charity match, got all sorts. So yeah, it's that's kind of the story in a nutshell. But it's been amazing, the biggest creative privilege of my life to be able to work with such a vast audience and such a great group of boys that, creatively, it's like the best thing ever. They have capital to fund stuff. They have an amazing audience, the biggest audience you could get. They have a love and a fandom and an attraction, to them and from their audience, which is on another level. And also they're just brilliant and very easy to work with and up for doing stuff, which is often very difficult. They're not precious insofar as they are, trying to guard and control everything. They're very open to us and collectively as a team making good decisions and going for it. So yeah, it's been a joy. It's been so much fun.
It sounds like an absolute whirlwind in an entirely positive way. And that I'm reminded of what my son said, they can do anything they want. So there's this question about how far it can all go. We'll maybe come on to that. I actually want to sort of go back a bit because, you did choose to, after 1 semester, to drop out of university. And if I guess so you were always sort of primed maybe for this type of thing. Can you trace back to sort of why you think you're built the way you're built to do what you do?
Oh, it's an interesting question. I think, I guess going back, well, it's still a lot of that was in the personal statement, I think, a little bit. I'd always had a lot of creative freedom. My parents were incredibly supportive and they gave me a lot of time and energy and just freedom to just do things and experiment from a creative standpoint. And I was, I don't know what it was, but I always had this thing about like brands and like making things that felt like a thing. I don't know if that makes anything, but like there's a whole psychology and a depth to a logo and how a logo establishes something as being real and like without a mark. And it's even something now, right, in everything. If you want to make it feel real, for me it's like give it a logo and put it in a deck, and the sort of two things. And I think that was always subconsciously for me a driver in everything I did. So when I was about 6 or 7, I set up this like, what was it, like a mixtape like brand thing called Database Productions. Means nothing, but it had this little logo that I made on Word, and I made like these mixtapes for my family and for friends and stuff. And then I set up a clothing company called Black Mountain, which I launched when I was like 16, I think 15, 16, set up a film magazine, and all these things were brands. I think the part of it that I loved was creating the identity, creating a site, getting fonts, getting a sense of an aesthetic around these things. Even if at the time I didn't really understand all of that, but that was definitely my drive and my sort of, I guess my inspiration or what pushed me with them, even at that age. And I think, that then, I guess the habitual practice of doing that and setting things up, launching them, creating a site, creating a brand, creating a set, like that is, I think, the thing that then led me really nicely into the world of work, where when I was at Vice, I had no idea what an agency was. I had no idea what any of these businesses did. I don't think anyone does when they're 17. You have to start and go through the process, which is why, again, university is such a waste of time, which we can maybe come on to. But yeah, I when I sort of got into it, it was quite natural for me, I guess, because I'd had that habitual sense of of making things real and setting things up and getting brands, turning brands which were ideas into something tangible. Which I guess, maybe that thinking about it is the foundation of it all. Yeah.
I can't let you get away with that statement. University is such a waste of time without exploring that. Come on.
Oh man. Oh well, yeah. Come on.
What's the deal?
Well, I mean, it's entirely generalized, and it doesn't really mean too much coming from me, right? What's my opinion in this? But I will say so I dropped out after 12 weeks from King's doing digital culture. Terrible, awful, horrific experience from an academic perspective. I just hated every part of it. And I think the biggest thing for me was it was so removed from the reality of everything I was doing. The challenge I had was being at Vice every Friday while I was at uni, but also all of that first summer, that I finished school, I was there for that whole the 6 weeks, and then was there every Friday. And then going from that to then university, to the uni degree, which I was doing for the 4 days, then vice on the fifth. Hardly any time. Lecturers who were so out of touch with the reality of the space. I knew what the space was and how it should I'd been in it, right? I lived and breathed it growing up. I'd worked at it even at a young age. Like, people at school, my friends and I were living and breathing this culture constantly. So then to go into this university degree, which was so far removed from anything we'd experienced, but also, everything that I'd experienced at Vice, which is at the cutting edge at the time anyway, especially the publishing world, online, it was scary to see that contrast and just how far removed it was. And then going through the sort of 3-4 years where all my other friends were going to uni and coming out, and I was visiting people at every uni in the country, well, about 6 or 7, like Manchester, Brighton, Bristol, like going out partying and seeing all my friends there and hearing their stories and experiences, and then going into the world of work and realizing that, especially and I can only speak about the creative space, and I can only speak about my industry. I can't say for everything it's a waste of time, because obviously it's not right. If you're going into being a doctor or an architect or things where there is a regimented hierarchy of qualification and a process, then of course it's necessary. But for the creative space, like going into the world of work and seeing all these different companies and realizing that no one cared what degree you had. A degree does not equal creativity or skill. But what does is experience, actually doing things and getting out there and delivering and making things happen. And that paired with also the fact that everyone I've spoken to, no one, and I cannot think of a single person who went to university to get into the creative space afterwards, came out, was better for university having gone than not. I can't think of a single person. And I think one of the things for me is I found anyway that dropping out was the best thing that happened, because I got so much time back that I could be then efficiently going out into the world of work and going through. So I think, for me, it's like things like what you guys are doing with mentoring, like actually having people who are there who can help you like tangibly work out how to play in the world of work, as well as work experience, getting out there and actually spending time. The amount I spoke to somebody, a family friend of mine, who's doing like a graphic design course, right? And she's saying they didn't even teach how to use Photoshop or Illustrator on a graphic design course, and they have to pay for it themselves if they wanted to use it. And it's like, hang on a minute, you could literally take all the money, because it's not cheap, right? They're talking, it's like 50 quid or something, a seminar or lecture or whatever, and like, it's a lot of money. And then to be able, you could take that money for one seminar, put that into Creative Cloud, go home, go on YouTube for free, and learn every single program you could ever want. And that it's things like that which are so far removed. And the more time goes by, the more insane the model is to me, and the more I think the whole thing in this industry especially needs to collapse, because I think a lot of people coming out being absolutely scammed. And I feel really bad, because a lot of people come out, they try and get into the world of work, and people who either haven't gone to uni or have gone a different path are way ahead, and then they're at the back of the line and often haven't built up the actual skills they need to deliver in the world of work. So what was the point in the qualification, especially when no one I've ever seen or met, or any of the companies or any hiring that I've done or been a part of, has ever looked at a degree in this space anyway. So I don't know.
It's really insightful, because there are knowledge-based degrees, like you talked about medicine or something, but for skills-based degrees. And of course, Richie, the School of Marketing leading provider in apprenticeships, you're riding this curve of giving people practical skills from the get-go. Awesome. So you talked about team, Jordan, and you use this construct of high freedom, high trust. You sound very literate already. Now, some people never learn how to build team culture. They just never get there. For many people, it takes a long time. It seems like, is this something that's quite intuitive to you about how to create the culture of a winning team?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think I wouldn't say it's so intuitive to me as such. I think it's more that I have experienced all sorts of teams now. Well, it's all sorts. I'm acting like I've been in this game for like 30 years of my life, which I definitely haven't. In my limited short time of doing what I've been doing, I've experienced quite a few teams. I know I've seen quite quickly what works and what doesn't. I felt by being in teams and being at different levels of those teams, senior, and then coming in as a work experience or intern, like that full spectrum of what it's like to be managed and to be in environments that aren't high trust, high freedom, and then being in environments that are, being in some environments that are in the middle ground. I think for me, it's been it's night and day, and I think people are different, right, in the way they work. Some people like to be slightly more guided and given more more micromanagement than others. But generally, I think from people I've met, especially in the space, we have to be creative and think on your feet and be strategic. People generally, from my experience, again, it's a generalization, but respond best to having high freedom and high trust. And I think also being paid well, which also comes into that, like paying people properly, giving them high trust, and giving them a lot of freedom. I mean, I can't think of many people who wouldn't prefer that to the alternative, which I think is actually more prevalent in most places, which isn't high trust, isn't high freedom, and isn't well paid. And I think for me, if you get that I guess those ingredients correctly, it produces the best in people. And I felt that when I've had all three, and I felt that when I haven't had all three or had one or two. So I think for us as Arcade, we're in a very privileged position to be, doing well and having a business which is lean and small and highly profitable. So we're in a position where we're able to, make those calls and bring the best people in. And we're not trying to do a vanity project for us around, bloating this business out into something massive just for the sake of it. We're not trying to hire a million people. We want to hire the best people and work with the boys to staff their team up and give them the best people, which is really what we're doing. I think we are, as Arcade, slightly invisible in that we are facilitating the corporate structure of the Sidemen Inc. or the Sidemen Entertainment brands. And so it's doing that is about making sure that from the get-go, because we can deliver those three things and we're kind of in charge of that, making sure that that's set from day one, because I think otherwise it becomes immediately tainted and people don't work at their best. So I think it's something I'm really passionate about, and everybody who comes through the business so far has been really responding well to it. And I think it's a big reason why we're able to do what we're able to do.
Jordan, when I listen to you, it feels like you're genuinely trailblazing in a number of areas, right? Whether it's the role of education and how that plays out in the future, and your opinion about that, around culture, teams, even the way that the organization functions, around you being the bolster to a bigger sort of entity and brand, and how that kind of comes together. It all feels just sort of really novel, like you're kind of carving out new territory in this space and doing so in a really kind of humble way. Just, it's not about vanity. It's all about, let's get the job done, do it well, and let's build on that and create amazing teams, and let's create amazing brands, and the sky's the limit. It just feels like something quite special that's kind of going to that. There's one thing that sort of thought that sparred within me was, you talked about Sidemen coming up to a decade in their existence and their brand, their evolution. And like all good brands, you need to constantly evolve, right? Your audiences will evolve, your people are, and your teams evolve, etc. So how do you keep in touch, or how do you make sure that they keep in touch with their audiences and evolve through time? What's the
I think
around that?
I think it's look, I think this is what they're best at, is staying fresh. I mean, how many people can you think you've had a decade-long career at the top of what they're doing? And I think their secret is themselves. I think, because, and I mean that what I mean by that is they are 100% themselves. Yes, slightly more exaggerated here and there, or they create characters and they play up and they do things, but they are exactly as you see them on screen. And I think that's the key. So that as they grow and evolve, their content grows and evolves with them. And they're into different things. They have different sense of humor. They're trying new things out. They want to have different experiences, and that then keeps the content fresh. So I think when your brand is a personal brand at the core, I'm talking specifically about the content, then it's somewhat natural and easy to evolve, as long as you just stay true to yourself. Because as you grow older, the content changes. So I think that's their secret, is to be themselves. I think for the brand and the corporate side, it's about us challenging convention and trying to do things differently, and try and do things that aren't necessarily expected in the space. And I think that's the key for us, is to constantly be pushing things forward and making sure that we're not resting on any laurels. That every campaign that we do is delivered in a way that's really innovative and different, that every brand that we launch is fresh and is something that is hopefully trailblazing in a way, as you're saying. I mean, that is really nice to hear. I think that is definitely our hope. I think for the boys as well, they really want to be and stay at that number one spot, where they are constantly pushing and pushing and pushing, and they don't want to rest up. So it's our job to match that energy by thinking of and executing ideas which are bigger and bigger and bigger and better and better and better. And hopefully that's coming through in the things we're doing so far. I love personally, like, one of the things that gets me so excited is doing things. There's always been a thing, doing things which make you sit up and go, oh, I wasn't expecting that, or that's a different pairing or a different way of doing things. And then that sense of intrigue is something which I love delivering on, hopefully. And I think we as a team have done and hopefully a decent job at that with the boys. Things like Revolut, which is a brand new, hopefully a partnership even, which is hopefully quite surprising. And like, oh, how would those brands come together? But that's the stuff I'm like, okay, that's really cool, because people talk to me and they say, that was really interesting, I didn't see that one coming, or that's really pushed things forward in the space, or that's completely unexpected, and that's the stuff that makes me excited. So I think that's it really. On them on the content side, it's being themselves, thinking of bigger and better ideas, and pushing themselves creatively. For us, it's about trying to match that with innovative and unexpected delivery of brands and ideas.
You said pushing forward a couple of times. I mean, it's harder, isn't it, to keep being fresh over time when it's easier to get to number one than stay number one. So there must be some setbacks along the way. I mean, there must be some things where you don't get the results you quite wanted. I'm guessing it hasn't been 100% perfect. So what are some of the things that you've had to dig deeper and learn from?
Oh, for sure. I think for us is partly in that innovation and trying to push. And look, we've been doing this for a year and a half, right? I think we asked this quite. If you come back and have this interview in 5 years' time, it might be a bit different. Like, who knows? Because you're right, it's definitely easier to be. And I always say this as well, just to preface that we have a distinctly easy job because of the boys, right? The boys are they have done 99.9% of the work. We're the 1% now coming in. Or the 1% coming in and just helping to add to that. But they are unbelievable, and what they've delivered over 10 years has meant that we are sitting on an audience of a fan base of hundreds of millions of people across the world, which is just that's really the goal. But I think the hard stuff really is on innovating when you have to step into territories which you don't understand or know, or you're pushing out control, or you're in situations that aren't always comfortable. Because I think the challenge for us, right, we're used to being in control of everything. So when we're working, we've got the most incredible team, for example, on sides, right? And obviously, Richie, you know very well, an amazing team with Robin leading the charge and Hero. Now the challenge for us was adapting, and the boys was adapting to that feeling of, okay, but forgetting Hero and us for a minute, we're working with kitchens and operators and chefs, and that's a different beast to anything we've experienced before, because food has problems because it's food and it's not easy, and you don't know whether every meal that goes out is a risk, and every person who posts something is potentially an unhappy customer. You don't know. So that's the bit that for us was really difficult to feel comfortable with, is the discomfort of I guess not being in control. I think for the boys, for us, for everybody, we had to really adapt to that. I think the Hero team, obviously they look after a number of brands. They're seasoned in that, pardon the pun, they're very seasoned in that that feeling of not being completely in control when they have franchise partners, and you have to ride the storm. But for us in food especially, it was I think a very good lesson in learning to be comfortable with not being in control of everything, and being comfortable with being uncomfortable, because otherwise you can't enjoy it, because you're worried about, and especially when in the boys, for example, they're used to being completely in control of their content, and now they're in a position where, like, again, they've got chefs who could potentially mess up the food, and have done on occasions, right? Because that's life. And when you scale as well, the more problems there are. So I think that's been a real learning, is being comfortable with that, and then also seeing how that being offset with being being able to raise standards and improve things, and also deliver great food, and people love the product and come back. And I think it's all of that. That is for me the biggest learning, is like the more new territories we enter, especially with products that aren't as simple as merch, for example, or even vodka is relatively simple in that their bottle is a bottled singular product that doesn't age. Like, that's when it becomes more challenging to adapt to. But once you've adapted, it I think improves everybody, because you're emboldened, I think, to go into even more challenging and different spaces. But I think that's the one thing that has been a learning for sure. And that wasn't easy to begin with. I think it's gone a lot better now.
That's awesome, man. And I think that the thought around constantly challenging, innovating, even the product innovation, as you mentioned, as you scale, comes with challenge. But actually, that's worthwhile challenge to take.
Exactly.
That's really, it's a really great perspective. But I'm going to throw in a curveball question here for you, man, and a bit of an open one, because I really want to get your take on this. What do you genuinely think is the future of marketing?
Oh, that's a big question. I think what do I think the future of marketing is? I mean, it's tricky. I think as far as I can tell, the future of marketing and by the future of marketing, I'm going to define it as the ability for brands to sell to consumers effectively. The future of the ability for brands to sell to consumers effectively will be and I think it goes without saying, in personalities and talent. 100%. And I think that is the case because this generation and this audience, people of my age and younger who are growing up, are entirely dominated by talent, personalities, and people. And that's because I think people buy people, they don't buy brands. And the way that young people are engaging with brands and with their entire their entire world online is through social platforms, which are personality led and all about people. And that is the dominating medium, where the internet generally, or search engines and whatnot, traditionally, the way that maybe even my generation would experience purchasing and brands and I guess that engagement with corporations, that's now switched to social, where social is becoming the search engines, right? And if you go on something like a TikTok, and you can search for anything and you'll get an answer, right? So that, as an example, is how this generation is changing to become about content and about people, and that comes together perfectly on social. So I think talent-led brands, and not just talent of a level like the boys, but I think people, like brands using people to sell things, obviously, but that becoming in heightened on another level, given that social is now the dominant space. And I think more and more talent brands will set up, of course, more and more talent will become, millionaires, billionaires. Like ultimately they'll scale their own businesses and their own ventures. And even if it's things like talent investing in brands, and those brands becoming the next stars because of those affiliations and those links, like the people and the talent are becoming so integral to the marketing process, I think. And I think we've experienced that firsthand with what we're doing with the boys. And I think over in the States, there are a number of examples, even what JJ on his own, obviously separate to everything that we're doing with his own personal team, have done with Prime and Logan. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I think it's a signal of what's to come, because there'll be another Logan, there'll be another Sidemen, there'll be another JJ for the next generation. I don't think necessarily to the same level, but there'll be new people coming through, and then they'll have set that blueprint. Hopefully what we're doing will set that blueprint too. So I think it's definitely the start of something here in relation to talent-led marketing, brands, ventures. And I think it will only become more and more important as this generation become older, and as the talent become the stakeholders in these businesses, which is happening increasingly as well.
I wouldn't bet against that. In that world, what are your aspirations? How far can you go personally?
I don't know. I think I've always, it sounds really weird, I've never really been overly ambitious in a long-term sense. I've always felt
a little bit weird, I have to say, because
I think maybe I'm being like in a fake way kind of vein, and like, you know what I mean? I'm hiding it, but I actually don't like. I've never sat there and said, "Here's where I want to be," or "Here's how far I want to go." I don't work like that, and I don't enjoy that. What I enjoy more is constantly doing what feels right, moving when I need to move, feeling like innovating and pushing and delivering, and hopefully working with great people, which I think is the principal thing, and then seeing where that takes me. And that's why I think this opportunity with the boys that we're on right now, and this journey with them, is so fun, because ultimately I'm happy to stop when they stop, whenever that is. Like, let's keep going until we're at a point where we've really done it all. And that's the exciting bit about where we're at right now, is there isn't that sense of I think it's a focused ambition rather than a bigger ambition. I think also for me, I've never really been one on like my personal side like that. It will be where it will be. It's more about, I think in this case for the boys, how far can we take them, and how far can we really deliver on building the brand, and on getting, I think, the brand recognized and the boys recognized as this biggest cultural export, which I genuinely believe, and I think it can be proven. How do we deliver that at scale across the world, and how do we get their ambitions realized? I think that's where I'm at right now, and I think maybe that changes in 5 years, 10 years, but for now, that's definitely where my head's at.
Man, that's awesome, and I'm sure you'll achieve that and more in spades. Quite frankly, it just feels like you've got such a lovely attitude towards the whole thing, and actually, like you say, you feel like you said that you're not ambitious for yourself, but it comes with a connotation. I get a sense. I can kind of see where you're going with that. I think you are, but
yeah. So I mean, it's not overly true. I mean, you know what I mean. It's more like it's a secondary motive. The primary motive is the project at hand and doing what we're trying to do together, I think, as a group and with the boys.
Yeah, totally, man. But so. And we're sort of coming to the end of the segment, so maybe for an ultimate question here. But I just want to, I guess, get a sense from you, if there were some key lessons that you had learned along the way, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I would say keep pushing and keep moving. I think when you're young, the best thing that I found was moving around and doing different things and never settling. Like, never settle, just because when you're trying to move through the ranks of businesses, you don't actually know. I think I was very fortunate with my agency Roundabout that I set up, which was a Gen Z marketing agency that I set up when I left Lab Bible. That opened so many doors. And I think one of those was then James Grant, which became my time at YMU, which obviously, again, I keep saying obviously as if everyone knows this stuff, but we rebranded from James Grant to YMU. But yeah, I think it's keep pushing and moving, and don't settle until you find that freedom and that life work, that work which isn't work. You know what I mean? I think when you're building and you're trying to network and you're growing your profile and you're developing what you're doing, there's no fear in moving and in adapting, because ultimately, as the more you evolve, the more people you'll meet, the more companies you'll experience. I think that's one of the best things, like experiencing different businesses, like going into different companies, seeing how they work, staying there for a couple of years and moving on to somewhere and evolving, upping your salary, upping your position. That's really powerful. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that personally. I think the kind of gone are the days where you sit in one company for 20 years instinctively. I think gone are those days in this space anyway, because I think actually it's changing so much. You want to be on the cutting edge, and that can only come with more knowledge, more experience, and more people in your network.
Do you know, Jordan, Richard said that was the penultimate question. I can't think of a better question than that to end. What a fantastic wrap to talk about no fear of a new world and embracing its opportunities. So Richie, you may have a final question, but I think that's such a brilliant stepping out point in terms of the advice that you gave to yourself when you were younger, but I think could apply to everybody, not least Richie and I. So thank you, Jordan. That was amazing. I mean, it's a whirlwind to hear. I mean, I'm so impressed that. I mean, not least that you're doing this with two young kids. I mean, my kids are a little bit older, and you know that is a thing in itself. But I take away so much from this. But let's just hover on the key things. The pace. I mean, there is a need for efficiency, productivity. You just got to push yourself to drive and deliver. I mean, that comes through in spades. I love the conversation around culture. It's sort of part of the key thing that I find most interesting about business and commerce, and super impressive. And I think everyone could take away the notion of creating a high freedom, high trust environment. The innovation, the innovation streak, the trying new things, the pushing things forward, lessons there for everybody. But I come back to, you're just incredibly humble with it all. It is even to my question, which is a bit sort of, forcing you into a corner. How ambitious are you? There's a humility, which I suspect probably is important to deal with the Sidemen, because it's not a competition. You're not trying to compete with them, but at the same time, I'm sure is what goes at the heart of that high freedom, high trust culture that you've created, and at the heart of your success. And I'm super excited to see what will come. Some of it I get vicariously through my kids. Granted, I'm a slightly different demo and all that, but when do you fill Wembley? 24th of September, 26,000 people. When do you fill up 100,000 stadium? I don't know, but I mean, it's just going to be super interesting to see where you take Sidemen and also yourself. So thank you. It's been a privilege. Richie.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, sorry, Richie, go.
No, not at all. I just have to really applaud you, Jordan. I mean, it's an incredible journey. And a relatively short space of time and all that, granted, but yet interestingly, go back to your personal statement and the type of ambition that you had back then, the entrepreneurialism you showed back then, and the gumption that you had when 12 weeks in, you ditched it to carve your own path. Shit. Wow. I mean, that's, and then since that moment and to this moment, and I'm sure beyond, you have absolutely proven that you can go down the path less traveled and actually have an amazing go at it, have an amazing adventure along the way, and do some incredible things. That's rare, man. I mean, that's rare. And I think that'll be incredibly inspiring, both for the generation coming up, and probably in your shoes 7 years ago, but also for people like myself and the rest of it, where we can take chances and we should take chances. And that's just incredible, man. So, I mean, I want to end on that, just say, really applaud you for what you've done and what you were doing. Just keep going. It's, watching in all anticipation for what's coming up with the Sidemen and for you personally as well.
Oh man, no, thank you. Yeah, that means a lot, guys. Thank you so much. And I think, look, it's a lot of fun and it's really exciting. And I think, I appreciate that a lot because, yeah, hopefully people at home will see that, yeah, it's, as you're saying, the linear way isn't always the best. And I think maybe that's part of the meeting of the world between myself, Aaron and Sam and the boys, actually, is that all of us, and Victor's always joined us, are all people who've hopefully done things a little bit differently, and they are the embodiment of that. So maybe that's why it works. But no, thank you so much, guys. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, and it really means a lot, everything you've said. So yeah, and if you've got any students or any people who need or want any advice or support, more than happy to speak to people and take time. So yeah,